Hey everybody, welcome back to Touch and Glass Podcast with your host, me. I'm your host. I'm your host forever and always, so deal with it. We're going to cover a couple of things today. In major news, the Patriots signed Ezekiel Elliott, so that kind of takes Raheem Stevenson's draft value down. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about my selections in my fantasy football draft, one out of two. We're going to talk about do's and don'ts of just kind of what players to maybe take a chance on, what players to just not take a chance on at all. And we're going to look at the new ranking system that they have out there. They're updating this every week, so let's just get into it. So first we'll look at my team that I drafted. So we'll just start from top to bottom. So my quarterback, I waited. I maybe waited a little too long, but that's fine. I'm surprisingly still got a top quarterback. So I drafted this quarterback in the 9th round at 62 overall, or 62nd overall. I think I had off the top of my head, I kind of forget, I think I had the 5th pick, or the 3rd, I think I had the 5th pick. So we were doing a snake draft, so that meant I had the 5th pick in the first round, and then I had, I forget how many people there was. I think there was 10, so I would just stay in the same spot in the next round. I forget how many people there were, but I drafted Justin Herbert, who I'm very surprised I was able to draft that late. I kind of got distracted by drafting other key players. So then my number one RB, probably going to change throughout the week, but my number one RB right now is Josh Jacobs, and I drafted him in the 3rd round at 20th overall. Again, that's fantastic value for Josh Jacobs. He is the number one running back for the Raiders. There's nobody else in contention for his spot, and he's a top running back too. He should have probably gone in the 1st round, so I'm very surprised I got him. Then my RB2, I drafted in the 4th round, just right after Josh Jacobs, because I was very surprised that he was still there. And it was Najee Harris. Najee Harris, again, same thing, top running back. He has no competition on the Steelers, so nobody's going to try and take his spot. Again, it's all varied. Like, he could get injured, he could just not have a good week one week. Anything could happen. But right now, Najee Harris. And then I think this was my first pick of the draft, because how can I pass up on him? Though now thinking about it, I'm slightly worried about it. Just now thinking about his play style, but it's fine. So I drafted, I had the 6th. I drafted Cooper Kupp 6th overall. He's been he's been an elite wide receiver for the Rams. He had that one really good year, but then he kind of, I think, slowed down. If I can look at his last year's stats. Are these his last year's? I remember there was one year. I don't think it was last year. I mean, if these are his last year's, because he had because the Rams won like 2 seasons ago. So it wasn't last year, because last year I think was the Buccaneers, I think. No, who just won? Oh, no, the Chiefs. Jeez. The Buccaneers were 2 years ago. The Rams were 3 years ago. So this is his last year's stats. So I'm still confident that he'll do good. And then, very surprisingly, my wide receiver 2 is Stephon Diggs, who is yes. There was actually a lot less. This is the good thing about having not as many people in your draft. So I had the 6th pick, and then because there wasn't as many people in the draft, I also had the 9th pick, because it's not a sleeper draft. I can't think of the word. It's Oh, I just said it before. Whatever. It's the draft that switches your position. So I went from the 6th to the 9th, and I was able to draft Stephon Diggs, and that's great value. Like, already, my 2 wide receivers are Cooper Kupp and Stephon Diggs. Both of those guys are easily top 5 picks. Somehow, I was able to draft both of them, but that is the quality of having a small group of people in your fantasy football league. And then my 2 running backs, Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris, both are top 10 running backs. But again, that is the nice thing about having. It's a little easier drafting star players when you have a smaller fantasy football league, but it's a little more fun when you have more people in the league, because then at the later rounds you kind of have to start kind of figuring out who's who, like who's a good selection here and there, as you get later into your draft. And then my tight end, who like, I know it's my own team and I made the selections, but like, these were amazing selections being available to me. I was able to draft George Kittle. Now thinking about it, I still would have drafted him in that position. I'm thinking of the quarterback situation. They still have Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, and now they have the new guy. I thought they had somebody new. I could have sworn. Regardless, Brock Purdy is their starting quarterback. So that's key for me, because George Kittle is their starting tight end. There's nobody in contention. My flex option at currently is a wide receiver, and that's Keenan Allen, and I drafted him 34th overall. And he's still a star player. Like, his points last year, he got injured. So he was injured after week 1, and then he came back and was like flying colors, just like my shirt. In his first official game back, he had 12 points, which, I mean, that's decent. Like, that's a good start to coming back. And then he just kept getting better. He had 15, 20, 21, went 16, but still pretty good. He was consistent until his last game, where he had 30 points. So Keenan Allen is a very good value at this late in the draft. And then I don't know how well they're going to do this year, and I wasn't biased about it. I just chose the best defense. I chose the Patriots defense because they were ranked number 1. And with defense, you don't have to worry about wins. It's not about wins with the defense. It's about interceptions. It's about sacks. It's about the score. How small the score is, or how large the score is. Like, if your defense is losing a game but only by like a kick, you're still gonna get like 20 points out of them. Let me see their points last year. So from week 1 to week like 8, they were basically getting like 4 to 10, sometimes 17, 13. But like after the bye week, they were way more consistent in getting 17 plus points, or 10 plus points. So they are a great value to select, and their defenses are gonna change throughout week by week. Nobody figured the Patriots would have the best defense, because obviously look at their offense. They didn't have a great offense this year. So, but I'm still happy with that selection. I may drop him later. I may just keep him. It's fantasy football. Everything changes. And then for my kicker, I drafted Jason Myers. Now, I went with Seattle's kicker because I wanted to go for more of the 3-point opportunity kickers. And he had a great record of taking those opportunities. Because yes, you could take the kicker of, say, the Chiefs, who constantly get touchdowns, and he'll constantly get the go at the 1 point kick, but he won't have as many opportunities because they're a good team. They're not gonna be on the fourth down with like 40 yards before the touchdown. Like they're gonna get a touchdown. Like they're just a good team. They may like kick the occasional one, but they're not gonna do it on a consistent basis. So I'm happy about that move. Again, kickers and defense will probably change throughout the week, and so my depth right now is actually looking quite good. Again, it's my team, but I think it's good. So my first depth pick was picked in the 37th round, and that was Bryce Hall. Now Bryce, is it Brees? It might be Brees, actually. I may be saying his name wrong this whole time. Where is his? There it is. He started out very good last year. He had 10, 13, 15, 15, 27, 20, 13. Very consistent player. And then he got injured. And I think a lot of people were worried about that injury coming back. And he is still technically injured right now. Same as George Kittle and Cooper Kupp. They all say questionable. But Cooper Kupp, I think I saw an article that's saying that he's going to come back. George Kittle's the starting tight end of the 49ers. They're going to make sure he comes back. So Bryce Hall, obviously I did this draft before. The Jets actually signed Dalvin Cook. So that may take Bryce Hall's value down. So, but whatever, he's a depth pick. Depth picks change all the time, because then my next running back that I had, my next bench is a running back, and that was James Conner. And James Conner is a very underrated player. He either didn't play or was injured for a couple games, because it shows 3 games in the middle of the early week that he wasn't playing. And then the bye, and then he didn't play in the last week. But his points were very good. And again, Arizona's not a good team. I mean, they have Kyler Murray, they have great players, but they can never seem to make it that extra step. But with players, it's not about having that team be the winner. It's about that player specifically having a good game. And as I see here, he's been having a great game, and I pretty much drafted him at the time that people would draft him at, because unless there's like a name that I'm like, oh man, like I'm surprised this guy's still there, I'm usually going to draft around when a player gets projected. Gets projected. So I drafted him at 51. It's hard to tell the value the later you go into the draft, but unless you see like a big name, you're like, oh wow, I'm very surprised that guy's here. This guy, I was actually quite surprised was available to me later, and I drafted him at 65, and that's DeAndre Swift. And just like I was mentioning, the team doesn't have to win. The player just has to do really good. He was on the Lions. The Lions had a horrible offense last year. Actually, maybe I have that backwards. I think the Lions had a great offense, but a horrible defense. But now, he's on the Eagles. The Eagles just went to the Super Bowl. They are a top-tier team. So, DeAndre Swift, having as many opportunities as he did on the Lions, he's going to have double that on the Eagles, because off the top of my head, the running back that I can think of the Eagles is Gainwell, and he hasn't really, ironically, gained well. He hasn't really been doing good as of late. So DeAndre Swift is a big pickup for me late in the draft, because my other two, obviously, like I mentioned, is Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris. But what if one of them gets injured? My depth, I think, is key. So my next bench pick is my other quarterback that I drafted, and that was actually Brock Purdy. And it's really good that I have George Kittle because they'll coincide, they'll help each other, which is really nice. And I drafted Brock Purdy at 76. It's always good sometimes. It's always good to have the starting quarterback and their starting offensive player, because if that quarterback has a great game, then the player will also have a great game if they're throwing to him. Because I think I remember, like with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, he's always their top target. So Kittle is going to be one of Brock Purdy's top target, more higher targets, I'd say. Maybe not top target, but probably higher. But I'm very happy with the quarterbacks that I have on this team. And then my next bench pick was, believe he was drafted last year, yeah. And it was just the later you get into the draft, the more you can kind of take a chance on a player. So I took a chance on George Pickens. He ended the week well. He didn't really start the season last year good. I mean, he had a couple good games here and there, but he ended his bye week fantastic, almost averaging at least like probably 12 points a game. There was a couple games where he didn't do so good, but again, he's a draft pick. I'm not too worried. Now this guy, I was very surprised, unless I'm forgetting another tight end on Buffalo, but I was able to draft Dawson Knox at 93. Him and probably Josh Jacobs, Stephon Diggs, are probably my two best valued guys, being able to pick late. Dawson Knox is the starting tight end of Buffalo. I'm just gonna quickly look that up. I don't think there's another Buffalo or another tight end that is on the Bills. Let me just quickly look. Yeah, no, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. They actually did draft Dalton Kincaid, so that may... I think they drafted Dalton Kincaid. Yeah, they just drafted Dalton. They actually drafted Dalton Kincaid in the first round. So that may take down the value of Dawson Knox. But Buffalo's a top team. Are they really gonna take a chance? They obviously want Dalton Kincaid to play, but I don't know if they're going to like instantly make him the starter right off the gate. Having Dawson Knox as their starter is great to have. Is great to have Dalton Kincaid learn from him, and I will probably pick up Dalton Kincaid if I start seeing Dawson Knox's value get smaller and smaller. Which I don't know. I personally think he isn't going to lose some of it. He's going to probably lose some, but I think he's still going to gain a majority. I think they're going to start Dalton Kincaid next year. But I will keep informed about Dalton Kincaid. I will actually follow him right now to see if there's any articles that pop up saying he'll be the starting tight end. If he starts, maybe if he plays a game, I do also want to wait for him to play at least one game. I want to see how he does, because again, you never know. People are drafting Bijan Robinson third overall, and he hasn't even played a game yet. I am just somebody who maybe just waits. Unless you have some insider information, I would suggest to wait. Just on that off chance that you think the guy's gonna like blow out for 30 points, and then he gets like 2, and you're kind of screwed over for that week. Or maybe he does get 30 points, but like everybody else kind of is having the same thought. Nobody's gonna be picking him up right now unless somebody just wants to use a roster spot on him, which is fine. Like if you want to use a roster spot on a player that hasn't played, go ahead. It's your team, whatever. My last pick is a very interesting pick. because he was from the Patriots, and he did pretty good, like very good. And I actually I got this guy off of waivers. Nobody drafted him because they're unsure of what is gonna happen with him. So I drafted Jacoby. I signed Jacoby Myers. Sorry about that. I signed Jacoby Myers, and he played like very good. There was a couple games that he didn't play. He might have gotten injured because he was the top wide receiver for the Patriots. Now he's on the Raiders, and the Raiders have Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback, and that's like the Raiders have always been a good team. They've just never had a top tier quarterback. Yeah, they had Derek Carr, and he played in some important games for them, but they never were able to take it to that next step. They were never able to just get over that damn hump. But so I'm quite happy about that selection. Again, this is all subjective. There could be, just like last year, some kid from the 49ers quarterback bench blew up, and I remember picking him up last year, and obviously that was Brock Purdy, and he's now the starting quarterback for the 49ers. So it's all subjective based. There could be a player who you think, okay, this guy's gonna do dominant, this guy's gonna do amazing. Good examples last year, my two quarterbacks were Aaron Rodgers and Trevor Lawrence, and I thought, oh, okay, Aaron Rodgers, top quarterback, but then he wasn't really the same. He didn't have targets in Green Bay. He may be different now in the Jets, because I'm gonna look up the Jets depth just to see what his options are versus Green Bay, because Green Bay is rebuilding right now, so they really don't have. Oh yeah, wait, Bryce Hall, but that doesn't really help for wide receiver, and Dalvin Cook. But for wide receivers, they actually have an old partner of Aaron Rodgers, Alan Lazard. But they have Garrett Wilson and Corey Davis. Garrett Wilson, I would have picked up if he was available. I probably should have, because he's a great wide receiver, and he may do better with Aaron Rodgers at the helm, now that he actually has a proper quarterback, and now that the quarterback has a proper wide receiver to throw to, and he has depth. Like McCoy Hardman, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Corey Davis, Tyler Cochran, CJ Uzma, like great depth options in wide receiver for the Jets. Now I just realized I spelled the word depth CDEPYH, and somehow it still figured out what I was trying to do. But so, to get back to my fantasy team, I'm quite happy with the selections. And so I will just see what happens moving forward. Like, I will just see how my team does. The thing I always do is I instantly go to the waiver wire after the first week, just in case there's like a player that did amazing and I want to pick them up. And when I say amazing, I say like if they get 15 to 20 points in their first game. Now, if you pick them up and you drop a guy and that guy does amazing the next week, and your guy doesn't do great, it's just all subjective. Now we're just going to look at the list of I've looked at this list before, the CBS Sports, from just different analysts talking about the top players. This list is pretty much the same, but the other list that I have on my other screen it actually shows you if a player rised up or dropped down. So the list on CBS Sports continuously has Jefferson first of all, Chase first of all, or second overall, McCaffrey, kind of either or, Hill, like Bijan Robinson, and a couple of them. The one guy doesn't have Bijan Robinson anywhere near to the top, but he has him at 11. But your typical like players that you kind of figure are here, like Amari St. Brown, AJ Brown, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb. So these are all kind of just these are analysts which I would listen to, but I mean it's your team. Like if you think this player, just because you have a gut feeling you think this player is gonna just perform well, then draft him. Draft that player that you think is going to do amazing. Now to look at this list. So this list shows who's number 1, number 2, yada yada. So number 1, Jefferson, McCaffrey, Chase, Kelsey, and then actually Kelsey went up 1. Kelsey was 5 and now he's 4. But the biggest drop, or the biggest plus, is Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb has always been a star running back for the Browns. Again, the Browns, not a very good team, but that doesn't matter for fantasy football. You just need that player to have an amazing season. So Nick Chubb plus 6, and then Tyreek Hill, Austin Eckler actually minus 3. But pretty much from tier 1 to tier 3, they're all pretty much like top players. I kind of wish I drafted Jonathan Taylor, but I didn't get a chance to. I wanted to draft somebody else. And so another kind of big drop is Saquon Barkley. He minus 7, so now he's top 15. Saquon Barkley is another player that you like, okay, like he's a big name. Maybe I should take a chance on him, because he's now at that latter half of his career where like he was a really good running back for a couple years there, and then just kind of wasn't. Like he just kind of stopped being a top tier running back. But you still have like top names on this list. So you have Devontae Adams, Amari St. Brown, like I said before, Josh Jacobs, Chris Olave, who, again, he was another player I really wanted to draft, but his numbers last year, they weren't convincing me, but I only was thinking about his name because I kept seeing it here. T. Higgins, another player that I kind of wish I drafted. And so Stevenson, Ramondre Stevenson, I think. I was going to draft him, but then I saw that the Patriots signed Ezekiel Elliott, who the issue, it's a great signing. I'm glad that we're actually having a star. He's kind of latter half, a star running back on the team, because I don't know if Mac Jones is it. I don't know if he's the guy, and so they're probably going to do a lot more running. But if you have both of the running, if you have Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott, great. But it's kind of impossible to do that. One time I think I had both the running backs of one team who was splitting receptions, and I was getting like tons of points because they were both the starting running back. But I don't know if they're going to equally give downs to both players. I think they're going to go a couple weeks with Stevenson and then a couple weeks with Elliott. That's kind of Bill Belichick's way. He never really picks one, and he never really fairly gives them like perfectly down the middle 50-50 splits. It's always like, okay, this guy's going to play the first 3 weeks, and if he does terrible, then I'm putting in the next guy and he's going to play 2 weeks, because just for whatever reason. But like there's still star players on this list. Where'd it go? So Aaron Jones, like a great running back for running back. What I think, yeah, running back for the Packers. Now he would actually be a good pickup because I don't really know who the Packers quarterback is, so they're going to be running the ball probably a lot. So that's a player to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Another player who actually got traded from the Panthers is now on Chicago, and that's DJ Moore. DJ Moore, I remember picking him up for a couple games there, and he did great. And that's the other key thing to do is constantly change your team around. If you don't just leave a player in because you think, oh, this is his week after, when he just went 4 weeks of getting like 3 points. Like, sit that guy, put another guy in who's at least getting better points for you. So always check the waiver wire, always check just all of that every week, because the waiver wire listing changes just like the draft. Like, it changes every week. So you could be picking first in the waiver wire, you could be picking third in the waiver wire. So always have options too. Options obviously that you can change. Like if let's just say DJ Moore, Bryce Hall, and Miles Sanders, 3 great running backs, or 2 great running backs and 1 great wide receiver. Say you wanted to I wanted to drop Bryce Hall in order to pick up DJ Moore, but then I see, oh, Miles Sanders is there, but I don't have another player that I want to drop. Then you have to decide at that point. But if you have two players that you want to drop, then it's much easier to decide. So it's still just top names. Another name that I was actually very much considering was J.K. Dobson, and I had the option to pick him. I don't know. Something was telling me not to, and I didn't pull the trigger. I probably should have, but I didn't. Another player was Terry McLaurin. And then actually James Conner is higher on this list than I assumed, so I'm very happy about that selection. And then it just kind of gets to a lot of familiar names, like George Kittle, Alvin Kamara, Darren Waller, Devontae Williams, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Dalvin Cook is down here. Who he was a top wide receiver, or a top running back for the Vikings, and I'm very surprised they let him go. And then the Jets picked him up. And the Jets are honestly, like, they're making a return. They're making their comeback. So I would probably look into the Jets players. Yeah, just a bunch of other names. Another name that I'm keeping my eye out for is Jackson Smith Njabari. I think that's how you say. Because he was a star draft prospect for the Seahawks, so I'm interested to see how that works out for him. Brandon Cooks was another player I was going to take a chance on, because now he's on Dallas, and Dallas is another one of those teams that's just right there, but they just can't seem to break through. They just can't seem to push right past. Elijah Moore, who I'm very surprised the Jets traded. He was a great wide receiver last year, but maybe he's just a one-off player. Speaking of one-off players, Geno Smith. And he's probably in my don't draft list unless he starts to have another amazing season. I just don't think he's going to have that amazing season again. So that actually does take me into my do and don't list. He's a type of player I would say don't draft. Don't draft the player who had that amazing 1 year and then hasn't really done anything with it. Like, the next year he got some points but not really many, and then like the following year had like even less. But the issue is drafting a guy, or looking to draft a guy who had an amazing year last year, like Geno Smith. He's a 50-50 guy. He's a high risk, high reward. There is a chance that he plays just as good, but there's also a chance that he plays he plays worse. So I would say not to draft that guy. A guy that I would draft is somebody who is like quite consistent. I know I said this before, but it's a good thing to remember. Is a guy who's consistent in his numbers. But if I say this is the first round and I haven't drafted anybody for my fantasy team, and I have the option between Barkley or I'm just looking at a top wide receiver or running back here, McCaffrey. If I had the option between Barkley and McCaffrey, Barkley probably has more points because like he was good for a couple years there, but McCaffrey is more of a consistent based guy. If I can actually look at the numbers, McCaffrey last year had where is it? McCaffrey last year, points per game, he averaged 16, which is like very good, but like you want like 25, you want like almost 30. So let me look at Barkley's numbers. So Barkley actually had less, but just a couple years ago, and my example, perfect example, just a couple years ago, and well, maybe not a couple, but in 2018, he was averaging 18 points a game. That is very good for a running back. McCaffrey wasn't averaging that, but he is now starting to be more of a consistent player. He's getting 15 points almost every game, and for consistent like years. So I would instantly take Christian McCaffrey over Barkley, and that was probably a bad example, but you get what I mean. Now another type of player that I wouldn't draft is probably somebody who has been injured a lot. Like he might play for 4 games a year, and does amazing for those 4 games. So I may pick him up in waivers later, or put him into like a trade for like somebody else, but just adding him. But the issue with a guy who's injury prone is he could be great for those first 4 weeks and then get injured for 8, and then you're stuck with a guy on IRL that you can't do anything with. You could drop him, but then there's the chance he comes back and then dominates for those 4 games. And I feel like I've had that happen to me before. But a player that I would draft, specifically for quarterbacks, I would probably always, at least with a quarterback, I'd always take a quarterback that's a big name. Like I mean, all of them kind of are, but kind of just choices that I'm seeing here. I probably wouldn't take Geno Smith because he hasn't really been a big name. I would take a chance on Kirk Cousins because the Vikings are right there again. They're another team that's just right there. I would probably take a chance on him. Daniel Jones, he's never really been that big of a name. He had a couple games here and there. Tua Tagovailoa, something like that. He is a quarterback that I probably would have drafted, but he's been very injury prone. He's had 2 concussions in the last year or 2. So he's a player that I wouldn't take a chance on. Dak Prescott, he's a player I would, but Dallas isn't really that great of a team. So that's the thing that you also have to look at is, yes, Dak Prescott is a name. He's a big name. Everybody knows his name, but he doesn't have a great team. It's like Rodgers. My mistake of drafting Rodgers the last 2 years, he's a big name, obviously, but he didn't have the supporting cast around him. Now, it kind of changes with teams like the 49ers, because Brock Purdy, before he played really well, wasn't a name, but I think they had to play him because Trey Lance was injured and Jimmy Garoppolo was injured. So they just put this guy in and gave him a couple games, and he's now, long story short, he blew up and became the starter for the 49ers, and that's huge. So it's I would always draft a guy who's a big name, but like I mentioned before, the later you get into the draft, the more I would start taking a chance. So like if I saw, like, say, Kyle Pitts, he hasn't really quite broken out yet, so I would probably take a chance and I would draft him later. I wouldn't draft him early on. Like, I had the option to draft Bijan Robinson, but he hasn't played a game, and I didn't really want to waste the 6th overall pick. So yeah, and so with players that I wouldn't draft is somebody who, I guess, kind of like a Geno Smith. Like, I guess that's the same example, but I was gonna say, like, somebody who kind of just plays, like, good for a couple games and then doesn't. But you keep him anyways because you think, okay, like, this is it. This is gonna be the game he breaks out. I would constantly just look at my team, maybe change my team every so often. There's obviously more do's and don'ts out there. That's just all I could kind of think off the top of my head. But now we'll look at I had it somewhere. Oh, it was yeah, that was it. Yeah. So let me actually just go back to my, if I can, my team, my fantasy team that I drafted. I can't seem to find it somewhere. That's okay. Yeah, so in individual positions, for do's and don'ts, I would get a big name for quarterback. I would take more chances probably on a wide receiver with a good quarterback than a running back on a good team, like Bijan Robinson. Like, I forget what team he got drafted to. Atlanta. Like, I don't know Atlanta's offense. I don't know if it's that good to have him be good, because you have to rely on a whole set of positions just for one guy. With a wide receiver, you just have to rely on one. You just have to beat that cornerback, or maybe two, that free safety or strong safety. You have to beat maximum 3 guys. With a running back, you have to have 5 key offensive linemen, and that's a little hard to take a chance on a running back. So I would take a chance on a wide receiver with a good quarterback before a running back with a bad offensive line, like Bijan Robinson. And then to go down the list with tight ends, I would take a chance. Like, if you're picking early and there's like the Kelsey's available, or T.J. Hawkinson, like the big names, I would obviously take them. But tight end, you can easily get away with just taking a chance on some guy. Just like wide receivers, they don't have a lot of. They just have to beat one guy, and the tight end for then maybe that counters what I said before with my tight end that I drafted, not George Kittle. I can't seem to find the thing. I might have closed it by accident. But with my tight end of Dalton Kincaid, I forget who drafted him. Anyways, I still think they won't play him. They won't give him a majority of roles just yet. Like, they want to see how he plays, obviously. But tight end is a position that you can easily take a chance on. Like, there's a lot of tight ends out there that always play very good and very consistent for a couple weeks, and then you just swap them out and find a new one. And then for defense and kickers, they're just subjective. You just kind of have to take the best available and then see how they play. I also don't make any trades, or I do look in the waiver wire just to see who's available. I did pick up one name, but usually I'm just gonna let my team ride until after week 1, just to see how everybody plays, just to see how the waiver wire players play, just to see. Like, I'm not ready to make a big trade for everybody, so don't rush into that. Don't go and trade like your 4-star players for Mahomes, because first of all, I doubt they would trade Mahomes even for 4-star players. And what if Mahomes has a terrible week 1? You don't know. What if Mahomes gets injured for the season? Like, it's you just have to wait for that season 1 just to see what happens. To kind of go back to tight ends, tight end is an easy position. It's a little more easier than wide receiver to take a chance on, because with trying to think of a team that doesn't have a great tight end, I guess with like the Patriots, maybe like an old, like back in the day, they didn't have like Hunter Henry and the other guy. They had I forget his O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard, I remember, did actually like really good. He did have Brady, but that's the key, is you have to have, if you're drafting a tight end, always look at who's the quarterback. If you're picking up a tight end, that's fine, but just make sure not to draft like a star player. So yeah, I would just kind of key notes is again, it's your draft. You can draft who you want, but my suggestions are quarterback, draft a name, like a big name. The later in the rounds, because you kind of get screwed if you don't draft a quarterback, like a bigger name quarterback. Running back, I would again take a bigger name, but also look at what team it is. Like if it's good example, I think it was the 49ers or the Chiefs. They had just their offensive line, because they're obviously top teams, their offensive line is elite. And so they had just kind of no-name running backs who did amazing for like 3 to 4 weeks. So I would look at the offensive line on teams that you want to take a chance on with a running back. With wide receivers, it's a little more easier because the team doesn't need to win. So a wide receiver on a bad team would be Justin Jefferson, actually. Perfect example. Justin Jefferson, one of the top players, is one of the fastest players, beats his cornerbacks all the time, and his quarterback is Kirk Cousins, who, top quarterback, but it's a little, you can take a chance on wide receivers because all they have to do is beat 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 guys. But if you are picking high and like players like Justin Jefferson are available somehow after pick number 1, easily pick them. But you can easily take a chance on wide receivers. Same thing with tight ends. I would also look at the size of the tight end, because that kind of also comes into the factor. You want a tall tight end. You want a big tight end, because tight ends for the most part are just going to be that guy who runs across the field and just like pushes through a bunch of people, or he's standing at just 3 yards away from the quarterback and then he pushes through for another 10 yards. So look at the size of them, and then defense, just best available. I would just do best available, honestly. It's all subjective based. Same thing with kickers. It's all subjective based. But yeah, that should be everything. So hopefully, whenever you guys have your draft, just kind of keep that information in the back of your mind that it is your team. You can draft however you want, but I just suggest the earlier you are in the round, get a key position, but also wait on quarterbacks because nobody really drafts a quarterback with the first 3 rounds. So with early in the draft bigger names in all of the positions because that's where the top players are. But later in the draft, you can start taking more chance. If for whatever reason you don't get a top tight end or top wide receiver, you can easily take a chance on one of them in the later rounds of the draft. And then same thing with defense. You're just waiting on that anyways. But yeah, that should be everything. So it was nice talking. Hope your day is going well. Oh, also, I am going to Fan Expo in Toronto. So if anybody is going, I will be wearing a Spider-Punk cosplay in a white jean jacket, so a little bit different from what you might have seen in the movie or the game. So if you do see me, come say hi. If you don't go, I would highly recommend going. It is a fantastic time. It's not just superheroes. It's everything. It's superheroes. It's horror. There was a tattoo parlor there last year. There was anime. There's voice actors among voice actors. There's celebrities among celebrities. You have to pay obviously for the ticket, and then you have to pay for meeting a celebrity and obviously buying merch and everything. But like, it's a fun 4-day week. Well, I guess weekend. Yeah, Thursday to Sunday is the whole event. And it's an extremely fun time for just anybody. Like it's not specific based, but it is a big event. So if you are going to go and it's your very first year, number 1, water. Bring water with you because if you buy it there, it's gonna be like $10 because they're just upcharging the price, which makes sense because there's 1,000 people there. If you want to bring a big cosplay, like one that's on stilts or whatever, just note that you may have to take it off a couple times and just carry it because it's like sometimes you're shoulder to shoulder with people. If you don't like confined spaces, then I would just probably wait. But the thing about waiting is you may lose out on like a cool thing that you want to buy. And I would also check out all of the vendors because everybody has different things. I bought a ring one time. I bought a sword. I bought a hand replica grenade from Halo. Like they have everything there for all kinds of people. They even have, I believe, they have like live showings of like video game tournaments, and you can test new games. You can test, I think I was gonna say consoles, but I think just games. But yeah, it is a very fun time. But for now, I am going to get off. But have a good night, have a good day, and or have a good afternoon. Peace.